What's up, everybody? Peter McKinnon here. Welcome back to yet another video. Today we're editing photos. We're gonna take something that looks like this and make it look like this, using Photoshop and some new tools and tricks within the software that I think are pretty exciting and that you are going to love. Intro. All right, guys, welcome back. Hope you are having a fantastic week. Now, earlier in the week, we did a photo assignments where I showed you my take on contrast, which was the shot of these mountains here. Now, I told you I'd done some extensive editing to this photograph and that we would go over that later in a video if you guys wanted to. You told me in the comments to make this video, so I'm a man of the people. I'm listening. We're making that video right now. So there's a few things in this that are gonna be pretty handy for you. One, you gotta have Photoshop. So if you are someone that uses Photoshop to enhance your photos, fix photos, color correct, skin correct, whatever, there's some new features inside that are super dope. There's another video I wanna make after this, but one thing at a time. So let's take a look at the photo we'll be editing today. Once you have opened Photoshop and you've got both the images inside, the one that you're working with, the one you're gonna replace, you can go ahead and drag that background to create a new layer, a background copy. On that copy, once it's selected, go up to Select and choose Select and Mask. It's gonna open a new little dialog window. You'll see everything on my screen goes immediately red. That's because I have the view mode selected as overlay. You can have on black, on white, it's all preference stuff, onion skin. I like the red overlay because it's just the easiest to work with, the easiest to spot where you've missed things. Then you're gonna go over to the bottom and make sure under output settings, it's selected to output to layer mask. So that's what we want right now. And then moving over to the top left corner of this, you'll have your brush and your brush size. Mine's set to 93 on the positive brush. And all you're gonna do is paint the foreground, the area that you want to remain, because we wanna mask out the sky. So we still want it to be selected. We still want it to be red. So because these mountain peaks are so sharp and so jagged and so clearly defined, watch this. It'll just be like one brush stroke and they're instantly, it's just masked, it's done. You don't have to do any finessing, it's literally perfect. And sometimes you'll know when you see a photo of yours, you'll think, that might work real well for an edit. That's why we're here, okay? Now, if you wanna clean up a little spot like that white spot down there, you can go to the second brush down on the left side here. That's called the Refine Edge brush tool. That's good to just paint over that section just to make it perfect. Now there are no extra white spots. We can zoom out there, take a look at it. Forget the smoothing and feathering and contrast right now. We'll deal with that stuff later. Doesn't matter right now, you're just gonna hit OK, and that gives you your sky masked out. Now go over to the other tab where you have your other sky and image waiting. Command A highlights everything, Command C copies. Go back over to the other tab, Command V pastes. And that pastes it on the very top of your layer stack. Now what you wanna do is drag it down to the middle. And when you drag it down to the middle, you'll notice that now it is replacing the sky you had originally. You're done. That's pretty much it. If you feather that out, you'd have a sky replacement, but we are going further. We are diving deeper into the Photoshop rabbit hole. You'll notice if I, on that layer selected, drag it up just a little bit, now we're seeing what looks like, oh, that looks like another picture. Like it looks like it maybe keeps going. And that looks pretty cool right there. But if we were to actually dissect this a little and look at it, what looks wrong? Obviously it looks like bad Photoshop right now because there's just the light doesn't work. The light doesn't match. The depth of field doesn't make sense. There's no way these mountains in the foreground would look this sharp, but also look this sharp in the distance. Unless we shot it at f22 and it still would not look the same. So with that photo selected, that's layer one right here, we're gonna go up to Filter, Blur Gallery, Field Blur. Now that's the most realistic looking blur you can get pretty much in Photoshop right now, where the bokeh actually looks real. So that's indicated by the top right slider up here at 15 pixels. If we max that out, you'll see it's gone. And if we have it at 0, we can just slowly work our way up. And it doesn't take much. Like 3, 4 looks good. We don't want it to look like this, because then that defeats the purpose of us having a mountain in the background. We're good at that, aren't we? But I'm gonna say somewhere around maybe like 8 right now. We can always come back and adjust this. And then we can change the style of bokeh as well. Light bokeh, heavy bokeh, the color of the bokeh. It's good to kind of just mess around with the sliders at the beginning to understand what they do. So obviously at 63%, it looks terrible. At 0%, it looks fine. We'll put it at 4%. Then we're gonna go ahead and hit OK. Now the next weird thing about this photo is the tips of the mountains, that ridge, that super clean ridge, that's just it. It's super clean. It's a little bit too clean. So now is the time where we're gonna feather it out to make it a little less harsh. So you're going to command click on that layer mask. Go right here. That's basically gonna select our whole bottom foreground with those marching ants. You can see that. Now up here on our properties tab, we have the option to feather that out. So I want to feather it out so it adds a little bit of what looks like fog in the distance. So I'm talking like 200, and then we're gonna hit Command D, which deselects it. That makes it look a little better. It's not as harsh, it's not as weird. We'll bring that down just a tad, maybe like 150, but we're not done yet. Now we wanna add a little bit of field blur to those tops of the mountains. Make sure we're on that proper layer. Filter, blur gallery, field blur. And then we're gonna just add a pin. I don't want this one there. We're gonna add one to the peak of this mountaintop, and we're gonna bring that blur to like 2 pixels. Maybe 3 pixels, right there. Just to make it stand out a little bit better. Okay, now I'm going to add a layer mask to the middle layer. That's by clicking down here, boom, and making sure our brush foreground is set to black. Hit B on your keyboard. Make sure your brush softness is selected. Soft round, I have about 3500 is what I have the brush set to. And I'm gonna paint in, let me get a little bit bigger here. I'm gonna paint in a little bit more of those original clouds. What that's gonna do is just make this look like it's a little bit more in the distance. I'm trying to blend that background with the foreground to make it look a little more natural. Fog is also gonna help us do that. Best part about the layer mask is if you don't like what you've done, while your brush is selected, you hit X, that switches your foreground colors. You can paint some of it back and just paint a little bit back. That's looking good right there. Zoom in, check everything. Everything still looks good. Now a little trick if you're worried about the field blur blurring the entire bottom of the mountain, you can put a layer mask on that and paint it out, or you could go super old school. You could drag another copy of your original edit, paste it on top, use your eraser tool, and only because we needed the peaks of those mountains to be basically a little bit blurred, we can then just go ahead and erase everything other than that. And that's gonna help with that sharpness. Just ever so slightly though, little hack. Okay, now for some fog. So you can get fog from all over the internet. Google image search it, fog isolated, Shutterstock, places like Lens Distortions. There's lots of different packs and overlays that you can get that have fog. I'm gonna be using this one here into the folder there, drag it out so it's a little bit bigger, and start it right there. I love this little wisp. This little section right here looks great. Change the blend mode over here in the layers palette down to screen. And then I'm just gonna position that where it looks, where you can see it a little bit better. That looks fantastic. Then I'm gonna grab a second piece of fog that's a little more dense. Some fog like this to kind of just blur a little more of the top of this photo. I'm using this fog to kind of hide the fact that there are multiple things happening, but I only want the fog just over the top of the mountain. I don't want it on top of the photo itself. So I'm gonna erase it from the top of this shot. I only want it just covering the peaks ever so slightly. All right, looking good. At this point, to add a little bit more contrast, you can adjust the curves with image adjustments, curves. Come over here, pull those down, give it a little bit of love right there. That looks awesome. You can go selective color to give it a color cast so everything looks the same, bringing everything together so it matches and feels cohesive. And after you've done your tweaks with your field blur and using the feathering on that mountaintop peak, masking it in with fog in the foreground and in the background and hiding things just enough so that it hopefully looks realistic, you're left with a photo and all these layers that looks something like this. I'm pretty happy with that. Considering we started with a raw photo that just didn't look like it had much salvageable. Typically, I'd look at a photo like that and just delete it right away. But at least flexing your muscles within Photoshop and these different programs to just even try. Just make the effort to see if you can make it look better. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes it'll just look like garbage. Trust me, I've been there, we all know it. And sometimes you surprise yourself and it looks decent. And you gotta start somewhere, and eventually you'll get to the point where these things are coming naturally. And that is if you wanna do this style of photo manipulation. A lot of people argue that it's not photography, and photography stopped the moment you started putting fake backgrounds in. And yeah, to a degree, I would agree with that. We're not calling it anything it's not right here. This is obviously fake, and I came out saying that from the beginning, but it's a cool skill to have, and it's a fun skill to have, and it's something that you can practice with that's only gonna help your photography in the future. Guys, so that is it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get something out of it. Hit the like button if you did. Smash it, 2020 style. If that's something that you're into. Subscribe if you aren't already, and I will see you in the next video.